Welcome. This is the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinscoe, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and general explorer of the service and experience space. On the podcast, I seek out and interview entrepreneurs, leading business people, authors, tech leaders, academics, and generally cool people doing interesting stuff in the service and experience space. Check out the archive at adrianswinscoe.com. That's enough from me. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Debbie Levitt, Debbie is variously the CXO of Delta CX, the Mary Poppins of CX UX, an author, researcher, does a bit of design and a whole bunch of other stuff in this sort of like space. But I'll let her tell you a bit more about herself in a minute. But hello, Debbie. How are you doing? Hope you're well.
All right. You're getting over the flu, but I would say I'm 95% there. How are you?
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Now, Debbie, for the benefit of our listeners who are not familiar with you and your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Hi, I'm Debbie Levitt, and my company's called Delta CX. Delta for change, CX for customer experience, as you can all tell. And my background is in a lot of strategy, CX, and UX work. So really anything that's about product and service strategy, anything that's about helping companies be more customer-centric and more focused on the humans in their ecosystem. So that ends up usually being a lot of strategy, research work, sometimes design, even business design. And gosh, anything. That's why they call me Mary Poppins. I fly in, fix everything they'll let me, sing a few songs, and fly away to where I'm needed next.
Well, I promise, given that you're just recovering from the flu, not to ask you to sing a song. Right,
I don't want to get you a copy strike or a copyright mark on that anyway.
Oh no, there's no fear of that, I don't think. Anyway, now when we were discussing, we're having a chat before the podcast and setting this up, and because I'm always interested in exploring new kind of ideas and just new perspectives on the podcast. And when we were setting up the podcast, you were saying that you think that we are in danger of kind of over-indexing on failure and celebrating failure rather than trying to emulate what makes successful companies successful. I mean, that's particularly when that's it. I thought that was really interesting, particularly when we're in the midst, it feels like we're in this era of break things, fail fast, and et cetera, et cetera. So, can you explain about what you mean by that, and also tell me about how it's actually manifesting itself?
Yeah, I mean, the manifesting is clear because in addition to the work that we all do, we're also customers, we're also users, and we usually feel pretty surrounded by crap. We feel like websites suck and these apps are terrible and they're being updated constantly, but it's always bug fixes because someone released crap and they're taping it back together. And we didn't like that human interaction with that company. We are surrounded by a lot of stuff that doesn't meet our own standards. So to us, I think the manifesting is generally clear. It's so hard for people to think of a company that's really doing an amazing job in a CX or UX or experience space. But then I see what's happened. You know, we started with the whole fail fast and just release things fast. And if you take too long, if you should be embarrassed when you release something. All these things we said to startups in like 2010, because so many of them had been releasing nothing. And so we said, no, go faster, release something, and an investor will want to give you money. But somehow this got overgeneralized to many of the more established and larger companies that many of us work for and with. And now we're at the point where we went from fail fast to pretty much undoing accountability. And now to the point where we seem to glorify failures. If your teams are doing a lot of experimentation or small launches or MVPs, and these tend to fail frequently, you see numbers like 50% of Amazon's A/B tests fail, 92% of Airbnb's A/B tests fail. But we're told, this is great. This is good product strategy. This is good product management. And I think any of us who've worked in business for any amount of time, and especially any of us with some sort of business degree, as I went and got during the pandemic, would know that failures are a sign that you're getting at least one thing wrong and probably a bunch. But instead of us saying, we're not doing something right here, we guessed what users would want, we were wrong. What ends up happening is we just glorify our process. We go, well, it's cool to fail fast. It's cool to go by guesses. It's cool to just go by an idea that you have and assume that somebody out there is going to want it. And in reality, these processes are extremely broken. Trying to be led by product rather than value is extremely broken. I'll stop talking for a moment, but those are some of the things that I notice when I look at these topics, that we sure have a lot of excuses and we sure have a lot of reasons to tell people maintain the status quo. Don't try to make this any better. This is good product management and product strategy, but it's not.
So that, I thank you for that. That's, it's interesting. I guess my question would be actually building on that. I mean, what should we then be doing more, or what else should we be doing instead of? Because it's actually, I guess my reaction to that is that I see some of these kind of companies and they make all sorts of different assumptions. Or product managers and designers make all sorts of different assumptions that are made in almost isolation, and they have to test their assumptions in order to. And it's like it's a science thing. You create a model, you put it out into the world, you see kind of like where you get the dents and the scratches, and then you sort of adjust to try and get it to more accurately reflects. I mean, and we're dealing with human beings here, and we're a fickle bunch, and sometimes we don't say, we're not accurate in expressing what we like and what we don't like. We're consummate liars, really, or authors of our own fiction. So, are you saying that we shouldn't be sort of failing, or should we do? What else should we do? Because you mentioned Amazon there, and I think one of the things I found fascinating about Amazon and companies like Amazon is that we talk about them all, but as this kind of like, angels start singing when Apple and Amazon start kind of getting mentioned in that whole CX space. It's like, oh, but yeah, nobody really. What they do is almost like hiding in plain sight, but we don't seem to emulate them and things. So I guess there's a whole spaghetti of kind of questions in there. I'll leave it to you to sort of unpick some of that and decide what you want to respond to. But what else should we be doing? And kind of, should we do things more in private, or should we be changing our approach? I mean, give me some clues here, Debbie.
Yeah, I've written down a couple of things that you said that I'd like to address, and it's conversations that I have quite often. So I wouldn't be surprised if many listeners are thinking some of the same things, like, hey, don't we have to come up with assumptions or hypotheses and then build and test those in order to know if we're going in the right direction or creating something that people want? But the interesting thing is that many companies, thinking that they're going to save time, have been kind of rejecting the idea of any sort of early research. So even though there's lots of books in the CX and UX and product spaces saying, really the first thing you should be doing is better understanding your target audiences. And that doesn't mean surveys and focus groups and a lot of the flawed things that we've been doing. It's really about observing people and interviewing them and not expecting them to know what they want or need or like. It's really about learning about their tasks. Nearly no matter what business you're in, your potential and current customers have a task. There's something they're trying to get done in your multiverse once a day or multiple times a day. They have tasks. That means that we can do early research where we take a look at tasks, especially from people who aren't your customers. Because once you're looking at them in your system, You're way down the process. You're evaluating a solution. You're not solution agnostic. You're not trying to learn more about people. You're trying to figure out, is this thing we're designing or building a good match for people? But if we go back to the earlier part of what should be part of our process, and again, many books are saying this. I'm not some random weirdo saying, wow, we should do this early research to better understand people.
Can I just say random weirdos are generally quite cool with me? That's fine.
Yeah, right, exactly. Punk weirdos. And so I'm not the only person on the planet suggesting this. Even people who I tend to disagree with are suggesting you've got to do this early research, which in CX and UX we typically call generative qualitative research, because we're generating evidence, data, and knowledge about our target audiences, about technology, about whatever might end up influencing our decisions, our priorities. And what happens is now, in an effort to be fast and MVP, and this is agile and this is lean, when it's really not, but we say that anyway, then we just say, well, we don't need this early research. We know our customers, right? How many of those meetings have you been in? We know our customers. We know what they want or need, or we think we can create something that they will want or need. So let's just start with the idea. And that's where you get things like build, test, learn. But we don't start with learn. It would be much smarter and definitely more efficient and a definite time and money saver if we started with more learning, where we wanted to know more about our target and current users. How do they do these types of tasks now? Where are they in our system, not in our system? How do they make decisions? What goes into their process? And then how can we make that better while trying to achieve our business goals as well? So I would say, do we have to test assumptions? My question is, why are we starting with assumptions? Assumptions are part of a guessing lasagna that might end up in the short or long term as a waste of time, money, customer trust, customer support. I just got an MBA and I don't remember anything in the MBA saying, don't do any research up front. Just come up with some assumptions about people and what they need and run with that.
Can I just say,
yeah, sure.
No disrespect, but having an MBA and taking an MBA and achieving an MBA, an MBA is per se, and I have one, so I know this.
No disrespect at all.
No, I'm speaking from my experience. I'm just saying, it's like, just because you've got one, it's a piece of advice that I was given when I first got my MBA and I was working on a project, and somebody turned around to me and said, you know what, here's the thing. It's like, they said, you should stop trying to sound like an MBA and be an MBA. And the thing that I took from that was this idea that it's just another tool in the toolbox, right? And it's all about you as a person. So I would agree with you. I tell you what, I would disagree with you because this is my economist head kicking in, because I'm trained as an economist as well, or was. I think I still am. Who knows?
Be the economist.
Somebody told me something else, is that because economists like to build models and forecasts and all these different things a way to try and represent what's going on in the world. And somebody said to me once, the interesting thing about models, they produce forecasts, right? But the forecasts are never wrong, because the forecasts are just products, they're outputs based on the assumptions that we make, the things that go into the model. And I thought about that and I was like going, yeah, because a model is a representation of our almost best guess of reality in many ways. And so I guess, but I do support your point about research, because I think there is this, it feels like there's this, everything has to be fast. It's almost like, yeah, kind of fast. Like it's fail fast and learn, and fail fast, move fast and break things, and all these different things. Fast is in everything. And I wonder if that actually moving fast and failing and things means we just give up on quality.
I think we already have. And I think that because, especially when you look at how a lot of workers are judged, a lot of workers are judged by deadlines, velocity. Did you get that to me in 2 days? And we're not judging people by quality. We're not judging people by outcomes. And that goes back to my suggestion that I'm not seeing much, if any, accountability out there.
Right.
And you can be accountable for a deadline, okay, but very often we're giving teams unreasonable deadlines because someone thinks you have to turn the factory floor robots up to 11 and that's the best way to go. And in reality, a factory floor never runs at the highest speed it can. It has to find a point of efficiency where we've gotten the best speed out of it that we can for the least amount of defects that we're trying to create. That's what lean is all about. And Agile tried to emulate that in a digital world. And so I think that we claim that we're failing and we're learning, but I don't feel like I'm watching teams really learn from their failures. They learned that the one idea that they had might not have been as good as they thought, but what did we really learn about what would be better for the user or whoever's experiencing this in this case? We very often still don't know. We just know that based on the KPIs we had, this thing didn't go as well as we thought that it would. And so let's just throw another dart at the board and try something else. And I think ultimately, this isn't fast. It takes much longer to guess our way to some sort of product or product market fit than for us to do research, as most of the companies who we admire are out there doing extensive research. Some of them even still have R&D teams where they're doing that early research and development. And we've taken away all of that and we've just said, no, it's just best to be fast. And I think a lot of companies have forgotten that while speed and efficiency are good, number one, extensive failures, especially in the eyes of our customers and the public, are not good. We're definitely not learning as much as we claim to. And as you said earlier, we're certainly not even emulating the companies we claim to admire most. Apple is rarely first to market. Apple invests a lot in R&D, and we hold them up and put up pictures on our holy altars of Steve Jobs and other people, and we quote them, and then we don't do any of the things that they're doing. Now, I'm not a super Apple fan, so I'm not saying, oh my gosh, you must follow Apple or you're just not good enough. But I think there's certainly something to be said for a company that isn't rushing out MVPs and isn't rushing out the fastest thing they could make and isn't is investing in research and more of that early knowledge and understanding around who the users really are and what they're doing so that can be simplified and made better so that when people go to most Apple products, they're saying, yeah, this just works. This just makes sense. But yet most of us live in a world in which the products and services we're surrounded by, they don't feel like they just work. They don't feel like they were made for us. They feel like they were made against us or in spite of us or to push us around a chessboard to make some sort of business goal. And so that's where I want to challenge some of this thinking, because I think that products and services shouldn't be our best guesses at models and ideas. They should be if you are going to make some sort of guess, where is the good evidence and data and knowledge going into that? So it's not just some product leader going, you know what would be cool? This thing. And hey, UX, and I've actually been asked this at jobs, hey, UX person, can you invent reasons why a user might want this?
Right.
Well, congratulations. Any of us can invent that, but that doesn't mean this is a good product strategy.
Yeah. So I'm interested in this the idea about research, because I think and I want to sort of explore kind of what that could mean as well, because I think that a lot of the time when people could have say research, I mean, it breaks down into sort of we're going to do a survey, or there's a panel thing, or a piece of quant and then a piece of qual, or maybe to get some focus groups, or we'll do this, that, the other, blah, blah, blah. Now, I guess, I wanted to kind of get your take on so what is it that, do you mean all of that, or is there kind of variations on that, or actually, do we need to also actually get research is all, also think about it in a slightly different way, because I have this view, right? And I think it's all about trying to get people closer to the point of experience, as it were, particularly from a leadership perspective, to give them perspective. And because there's just that other sort of like, if like meme or trope or whatever is the right sort of adjective to go to onto one of these things, where it says we have to be data-driven decision-making organizations. I'm like, okay, fair enough. But I think I play with this idea that there's different levels about data. I mean, there's the hard, data, and the level one is like data informs us. It's like the news, as it were. And then then the next level is that when we start kind of transforming that data into things like stories, then stories sort of move us. But actually, the level down from that is that experiences compel us. So if you think about that from an individual perspective, it's like, oh, we take the data and go like, oh, that's what happens. Transform it into a story, you go like, ah, that's cool. I get that. But actually, if we go and see it ourselves or experience it ourselves or understand the kind of the issue ourselves, then we're more likely to connect with it and if you like, and in air quotes, kind of believe it, if you know what I mean. That sort of seeing as believing type of idea. And I'm wondering if we need to, and I'm just exploring this, I'm sort of thinking out loud here, Debbie, is that when we say research, do we need to get more people across the organization involved in that sort of research to be able to own it? If you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I've written down 5 or 6 notes from what you've just said. So I apologize. My answer might be a little bit long as I try to touch on each of these things. But let's start with who should do researchers. And my answer to that is typically a well-qualified researcher. Because if they're considering the poor research we're doing right now and the not enough research we're doing and the manipulated research we're doing, it's not that we need to throw more bodies at this. I think we need to throw more expertise at it, because the problem is a lot of companies, in order, again, to try to be fast, they'll say, hey, we want to know more about what our users might buy. Now, again, that's not user focused. That's user manipulative. But we want to know about what they might buy or what they might need or what they think we're missing. So go call 3 people or go run a focus group or go run a survey. These are typically, not always, but these are often not correctly carried out research studies. They're sometimes not the right method of research for what we're trying to learn. And so I don't think it's that we need more people doing mediocre to poor research. I want to see if you can't qualify for a qualitative CX or UX research job at that company, you probably shouldn't be doing research. Now, that doesn't mean you're uninvolved in it. There's still ways to collaborate with our teammates, but I probably don't want you planning the research, recruiting it, executing it, analyzing it, synthesizing it, and coming up with actionable suggestions. It just might not be your strength, and that's okay. Your strength is somewhere else. But I think that we rely on especially the easily manipulated research styles. Surveys are not great. They're easily manipulated in how they're written and how they're assessed. Focus groups, I love to tell people, as soon as your focus group has a personality like mine in it, it's absolutely toast. But the question is, so before I do research, when I'm working with companies, I run an exercise that I like to call my knowledge quadrant, which people can find on my YouTube channel, which is called Customer Experience, Customer Centricity. Just go to YouTube, write CXCC knowledge quadrant and learn all about it. And there's no ads on the video. So I've got nothing to sell you here. This is just me teaching you a technique that's working well for me and others. And the idea is that I get my outer circle, my larger cross-functional team, my stakeholders, my higher level stakeholders into a sticky note board, which for me is usually Miro because I'm remote, hashtag not sponsored. And I ask people, here's a prompt, here's a project that we might work on, or here's an area that we might address with products or services. What are your questions? What do you wish you knew about current customers, potential customers, other people in our ecosystem? What do you wish you knew about our technology or our internal workings or logistics? And what are your assumptions? What are the assumptions and guesses and opinions we'd be working from if we weren't going to do some of this better qualitative research first? And I end up usually getting some questions that are out of scope, like how much will people pay for the thing we haven't even invented yet? Okay, hard to know. But very often I get a lot of hows and whys questions. Why do people do this? Why do people not do this? How do they do this? And these are the questions that very often our surveys and focus groups don't answer well or at all. And so this is where we can then use this quadrant to spin up the correct generative and qualitative research, where we're going to observe people. Again, a qualified researcher observes people, some interview questions, and we really act like as a detective. And that way, at the end of the research project, we can say, mission accomplished. I have answered all of your questions. I can tell you why people do things, why they don't do things, because very often we're not going to get that from a survey. We're not going to get that from data and analytics. We're not going to get that from an A/B test. So I can now explain human behavior and choices to the larger team and give everybody that foundational amount of evidence and knowledge. So we say we want to be data driven. We run a survey and we say 57% of people thought this idea sounded pretty good. This must be validated. But this is kind of a garbagey approach to that. And again, too easily manipulated. So this is more about qualitative. Can we explain how and why? Some companies have pulled me into workshops saying, we're going to solve a problem for the user and for our business because our business wants them to click this button more. And I say, okay, what's the data we have or the evidence we have on why they're not clicking that button more? Oh, we don't know that. We're going to workshop and guess that today. We're going to try to figure out why they don't do that. And I go, well, why didn't we research that first? Nearly every book and technique out there says before you try to solve a problem, you should understand the problem. We should have watched people in our system, not in our system, so that we can understand why do they do things? Why don't they do things? What's their motivators? What's their task? So these are the answers to the 5 things I've written down.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's brilliant. I mean, as you were speaking, I remember, remind me of an old interview I did with, and I cannot remember, it's Andrew something, who was at a company called Zopa. They're one of the biggest online peer-to-peer lending platforms in the UK, if not the world, actually. Anyway, they're purely online, and they did a fantastic thing. They did they routinely brought their customers into the office and asked them to do some real transactions, some real work, if you like, on their kind of platform in real time on a screen. You know, so they were sat at a desk and there was a screen, and then they were sat there, and then behind them, through a one-way glass thing, they had a whole bunch of people from product designers to marketeers to engineers, all these sort of things, just like watching them do things in real time. Like your point around the like why they don't click this button sort of thing. It's like because your button's not that important to them at that point in time.
Doesn't match their task.
And to actually, luckily, apparently they were also in a soundproof room as well. So people were shouting and screaming at kind of people kind of like who were trying to do this work. We were like, oh, but it's over there. Look, it's over there. And because I think the beautiful point, I think, with all of this sort of stuff, and I think this comes back to my broad but also kind of vague point about assumptions, is that we make assumptions based on our own sort of almost expertise and perspective. It's like the curse of expertise.
Sure.
Oh, we put it there because it'd be great, and it'll be like this sort of color and that sort of shape, and all that worked fine. And then you smash people up against reality, and they're like, "Shot car, yeah, you're not that smart." Or you might be smart, but actually, your smarts and kind of customer smarts have just not met. They've gone in different directions. And I think you're absolutely right that sort of research about what works, what doesn't work, I think really matters. But I think my point about the Zopa sort of thing, that still almost feels like they've done something and it hasn't been 100% right. It's about tweaking it, and they're sort of still almost experimenting and comfortable with a bit of failure and adjustment and things. So, I mean,
well, everything's going to fail a little bit. I'm not expecting people to have no failure, but one thing I want to poke at.
I just want to be clear. So experimenting and failing is still a good thing, right?
But they should be smart experiments. The funny thing is that not every idea should be turned into an experiment. There are many poor ideas. And every time we try to make an experiment, that's usually something that engineering now has to build. And what happens is we fall in love with our code, and we fall in love with the sunk cost fallacy of the effort we've put in. And sometimes when we get proven later that this was a failure, someone is still clinging to it. Oh, but it took us so long to build that. Or, oh, maybe it just needs a few small changes. As customers, we've seen things that were not going to be significantly better from a few small changes.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that people remember that it's not like I'm against failure and I think no one should ever fail, or I'm against experiments and no experiments should be run. But we must also remember that these can happen earlier in CX and UX processes through CX and UX prototypes, where engineering hasn't coded anything yet. We don't have that sunk cost. We're not in love with it. It's a UX prototype of some sort, and it can happily explode and be completely wrong and be something we have to completely rethink. But I also want to jump quickly onto your example of the people who brought people into the lab with the one-way mirror. There's one flaw, or at least one, in a study like that I just want to warn people about. So while the observational nature of that is probably much better than what a lot of listeners might be doing now, remember that one thing that's wrong about that approach is that you've taken people out of their natural environments. And in many cases, they're no longer on the bus trying to do this, or at their work desk on the slowest computer the company would give them, or on the bus holding onto a pole using one hand. We've brought them into our sterile lab, which usually means it was the people who could get to our office. They could take the time off, even if we are paying them. So we have to remember there's a skewed perspective there. The better way to do this is why you hear things called field studies, where we go out to you. And that was harder to do in the pandemic. We were all afraid to see each other in person, but now we're less afraid of that. And that's where a lot of professional researchers will come from social sciences. They'll come from anthropology and sociology, because they are really quite good at going into people's environments and being that detective. So yes, you can bring people into those lab environments, but you also have to remember that you might not have let them use their own equipment. They might not have been in their own environment with the dog peeing on the floor and the baby screaming. And that it's always better to see people in their environments trying to complete this task with their knowledge, their tools, their workarounds, their band-aids, their interruptions. Mm-hmm. That's going to be even a better slice of reality.
And how do you feel about the? Because I know that a lot of people, given that most things are, or many things rather, and a growing number of them are digital first these days. So it's either on a desktop or laptop computer screen or a mobile or whatever. And I know there are now platforms that will allow firms to do these types of observation type of kind of test. Not necessarily it's a camera looking at you, but they'll watch how you're interacting with things. How do you feel about that type of thing as like a research kind of method being in somebody's sort of space? So it's like, I guess you're not then wholesale having to go out and kind of shadow people and kind of like watch kind of like where they're at. I mean, are you a fan of those type of platforms?
Yes and no. Yeah. So definitely, because I tend to work on digital things, I'm doing a lot of my research in that way, where I'm getting on, say, a Zoom or other call with people, and I'm asking them some questions. And then I'm saying, okay, let's share your screen, use your favorite browser. Please go to this URL, which might be a dev build or a live product or a UX prototype. And I give them a task. You need to do this. Go. And that's just it. And you just shut up. Now,
but is there not like you talk about taking people out of their environment, and that you've got to understand how that kind of changes things. But there's also a thing called the Hawthorne effect, isn't there? which is is it the Hawthorne effect, whereas the behavior of the observers changed under observation?
Yeah, there definitely will be. We find that in general, people tend to be much more careful when they know that they're being in a research program like this, and that's why I tell people don't time how long people tend to do things, because sometimes people will say, "Well, I'm going to watch them do it, and I'm going to time how long they take," and I say, "But that's going to be a false measurement because they're probably going to go slower and be a little bit more careful because you're watching them." So there definitely is some of that effect, but I will say when you have a professional researcher having planned this research well and doing the correct, what we call moderation style, which is how you run a session, you can still find a mountain of crap. You can still find a lot of areas where people have no idea what to do and they run into dead ends, or they say, "Hey, this is pretty easy, I like it," and you've just watched them do it completely wrong. And so there's still a lot of great detective work that can go into it. Even in all of these, you're going to get that effect. Even if you show up to someone's office or home and you want to do a field study, very often you're setting up cameras. And if people have an awareness of those cameras, which they usually do, that can adjust things as well. But again, the more that we can try to make it realistic to what they're doing, the more we can see the realities of what they do and all of the who, what, where, when, why, and especially the whys and the hows, which we normally aren't going to pick up from A/B tests or experiments or surveys. And so even though there's technically never a perfect study, there's still always better ways to do this, whether that's trying to use a better technique or making sure you're working with more qualified, experienced researchers who aren't going to ask crap questions like, "What's our tool missing?" and "What do you want?" and some of these wildly crap questions that I sometimes get from what I would call non-researchers who like to talk to people.
Okay. So I tell you what, now, so we've kind of we've tore everybody down and now we're going to build them back up again. So, and show them the kind of the way that actually you think that or give them some examples, or hopefully we can give them some examples of organizations that you think are doing it well, or getting it right. I mean, so do you have one or two examples that you think, actually, I really like their approach. This is what they've done. This is what they did. This is what they produced. This is kind of how it kind of worked, because I think that would give people, and also kind of like how long that took. Because I think that would give people a comparison.
Yeah, and I want to say I'm not here to tear anybody down. That's not my intention. And
my language.
And I just want to make sure people know I'm trying to build up your team. I am trying to make it better by saying, look, not everybody is an amazing researcher. Some of you are. Some of you aren't. And the best thing you can do is have that self-awareness. I'm terrible at marketing. I'm terrible at coding. These are tasks nobody should give me, even if we're short people. And so I just want to remind people that just because you're short people, or just because something looks easy to do, because when Debbie does it, it looks so easy, it doesn't mean that we're great at it. And especially if we're seeing failures and we're seeing problems and we're making mistakes or we're making poor decisions, these are probably clues that somewhere in your process, something's not going right. And that's not meant to point any finger at any individual, but it's hopefully that agile retro moment where we can try to have some self-awareness about what we could do better. And maybe some of what we could do better is giving proper research to proper researchers.
Yeah, but I mean, also the point of many of these podcasts is to actually point the finger at something and just go, you know what, that's average or it's shit, and we should stop doing that and we should start doing it better with better people and better equipment, all these different sort of things. Because,
please, sure, I'm okay with that too.
Otherwise, it's a waste of time, and it's a waste of kind of like time and effort and resources and money and all of these different sort of things, and it produces crap. So it's like you put crap in, you get crap out. Why are you surprised? And so if we're just getting to the point where we're like going, that's rubbish, and then pointing the finger at that, or it's generally rubbish and it should be better, and here's how it should be better. For me, that's okay. And if that means you end up tearing some people down and people get slightly bruised and they're like becomes a bit like a bruised peach, it's like, so be it. Because
it's
actually,
the tough love
we're
aspect
in
of
pursuit of better outcomes.
We should be.
That's it.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I just want to make sure the audience isn't hearing I'm trying to specifically tear them down, because I don't know what they're doing or how, but I do agree with you that if we are seeing mistakes, poor decisions, failures, and other things, we shouldn't just say, well, Amazon's got failures too, so we must be okay. Or Airbnb has a high experimental failure rate, so we must be doing something right. I think we should always be in pursuit of that betterment for both ourselves and our internal processes, and for the outcomes for the customers and users, which we seem to rarely pay attention to. So I want to see people way more customer focused. I don't want you to only measure things by business goals. I want you to come up with KPIs and other things that measure, does the customer have success from the customer's perspective? Because guess what? Your customer doesn't care about a higher conversion rate. The business might, but the customer in that moment is not saying, gee, I think I need to convert more. There's a task that they're trying to accomplish. And if we can understand that task and make it better, easier, faster, more efficient, whatever it might be for that person, then maybe we have a chance of increasing the conversion rate because we made it better in the eyes of the user, not pushing them around the chessboard from the eyes of the business.
Okay. So back
who's
to the
doing
example.
it well?
Yeah, that's fine. Who's doing it well? Back to the examples. Have you got an example that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I can't claim to know too much about how this company works internally, but as a customer or user, one of my favorite companies right now is Monday.com. Definitely not sponsored. I pay them, they don't pay me. But I believe that they are creating a tool and a system that feels, at least to me, extremely customer focused. It seems to really understand the way that I'm trying to do my work, and every time they make a change to the system, it's not always an upgrade, but very often it's absolutely an upgrade. And it makes me feel like I belong here. I'm definitely the target audience for this company. They're making things for people like me, and they understand how I work. And when they recently released an experiment into their system that was absolutely not how I worked and really messed up my work, and I contacted them, they were like, oh my gosh, yes, we're turning this off nearly immediately. Don't worry, you're not going to have to use this. And this was an experiment. And that was strange for Monday, in my opinion, because they usually let you opt into their experiments. And this time they just unleashed it on people. And I'm getting the feeling that might have backfired for them. But I find that their system almost feels like it was fine-tuned for me, even though they've never interviewed me or researched me. So I must fit really well into their target audience. And when I write to their customer support, because once in a while I do need help, the people are amazing. Absolutely the best trained, nicest, most helpful people I've possibly ever dealt with. An absolute pleasure. I think many of us dread dealing with customer support people for various reasons. And these people have been amazing. And sometimes they will literally do it for me. They'll be like, yep, we figured out how to do that. Copy paste this into this box and it's going to take care of it for you. We tested it here. So to me, when I think about all of the key touch points with a company where I can feel like I belong here or I don't, or I want to give them my money or I don't, I love the way that Monday.com is doing things. I don't know how it works internally at all. I don't know how they approach experience, or if they have a chief experience officer, or if they're product led or sales led. I don't know anything about that. I only know that as the end user, I constantly have a feeling of this was really built for me and this just works. Like when people take that iPhone out of the box.
Perfect. Well, that's brilliant. It gives us a good old target to go and look at and see how they're doing. But I think it's the point that you're making, Debbie, about, I guess, over time, at how many companies have embraced this MVP, fail fast, break things, move fast, break things, learn, fail fast, all that type of stuff, is to be conscious of what we've lost and what we're not investing in, and that actually speed to market isn't guaranteed to give you product market fit and isn't
That's
guaranteed to give you to deliver kind of quality and engagement and all of these kind of things that we're looking for.
Yeah, customers don't want minimally viable anything. And customers don't have a calendar up of how fast you are. They just want quality. And I feel like we've moved so far away from that.
Yeah, no, I was just sort of reflecting on the kind of the what we've kind of like lost in the the process. And I think it's just to be conscious of that. It's like kind of where, the idea of like what sort of like where the insight and the route to quality and all of those different things are kind of what we've lost by trying to just move so fast. Yeah. Almost as like comes back to that old kind of piece of wisdom. Was it less haste and more speed? So in order, more the case of like just go slower in order to kind of like get there faster in many ways. And so
the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And those are old, wise sayings for a reason, I guess, because they're wise. Aha. So, Debbie, just kind of wrapping up. Is there anything else that you want to highlight before, or add that we've missed out before we start to wrap up?
Gosh, there's always endless things you and I could talk about, and I'm not sure. I think we covered. I've tried to write down everything you were saying and address it as fast as I could. So I hope that was punk enough.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, the thing is, it's like I think there's always different ways to approach kind of things, and I'm always interested to hear people's different perspectives, particularly if it's about they take a particular point of view about kind of what's going on and what's kind of like what's not working or what we can do better. And so thank you for kind of sharing that with me. But
thank you.
Here's the thing I wanted to do. So we talked about a whole bunch of things, but if I was to ask you to boil it all down to your best advice, I mean, I boil it down really right down to its point. It's like, I'm going to ask you to complete this sentence, Debbie. It's like, so Debbie Levitt says, if you would like to improve your customer and or employee experience, let's say your customer experience, then Debbie says, do this, ... Complete that sentence in parentheses. How would you complete the sentence?
I would probably, if I had to pick the one short thing, I would say early qualitative research to replace opinions, guesses, and assumptions with evidence, data, and knowledge.
Very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
So just to wrap things up, Debbie, yes. Before we go, I think you probably agree that the world is and continues to be a weird and often dark place. And I find myself in the mornings doom scrolling or trying not to doom scroll as I kind of drink my first cup of coffee. And so I wondered if you can help me end on a good news story or a positive note. So can you kind of tell me what's the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week?
I don't read or watch any news of any country. So I'm in the best headspace of anybody you know. I'm not doom scrolling at all. So whatever news I could possibly give you would just be
a positive story.
Personally, positive story.
And personal is really good.
Yeah. So personal positive story. About a week or so ago, I won the karaoke contest on the cruise ship I was on. That was fun. A friend of mine who moved to the UK just saw snow for the first time in her life, having the most fun. These are some positive things that are in my world and in my feeds because I am avoiding the news.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Well, two very good things. Congratulations on winning the karaoke.
Thank you.
You've obviously got some mad skills on the kind of on the karaoke mic.
Well, thank you.
But a great story about your friend seeing snow for the first time. So, Debbie, that's all I have for today. I just want to say thank you for sharing your time and your experience and your insight with us today. That's been brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks for the fantastic questions and conversation.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.